Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Maryhaven welcomes you to the 2020 Restoring Lives virtual celebration. And now, please welcome Sean Holt, Maryhaven's President and CEO.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us as we celebrate hope, transformation, and recovery. As you saw in the previous video, Maryhaven has a rich history of helping individuals and families heal from the disease of addiction for the last 67 years. We have been fortunate in the past to receive generous funding from individuals, corporations, and both federal and state grants to fulfill our mission. Like most of you, the last 6 months has challenged Maryhaven, both physically and financially. The devastating effects of COVID has reduced our overall funding by approximately $2.3 million, all while we continue to admit record numbers of patients each day that need our services. Now more than ever, we need all hands on deck. We need you to restore our communities. We are grateful that you have taken the time to be with us this hour. You won't want to miss a minute. We will recognize Nationwide for the great work that they have done with the Deny Ohio initiative, honor Maryhaven staff for the amazing work that they do each day, hear an incredible story of restoration for not only 2 individuals, but a whole family, and hear words of wisdom from Sam Quinones, national acclaimed author of Dreamland. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our MC, NBC4 News anchor, Colleen Marshall.
Welcome to Maryhaven's Restoring Lives virtual celebration. We have this opportunity to celebrate today because of the support of our generous sponsors. Please allow me to thank them. Our title sponsor, Nationwide. Presenting sponsor, Honda. Empowerment sponsors, Brainstorm Media, Medical Mutual. Enrichment sponsors, Grange Insurance, PNC. Supporting sponsors, All City Cleaning Services, the Crane Group, the Robert Weiler Company, and finally, thank you to all of our caring sponsors you see on the screen. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our matching sponsor, the Central Ohio Regional President of Huntington, Sue Zazon.
Good morning. We at Huntington are committed to strengthening and transforming our community. That is one reason we have an executive serving on Maryhaven's board of directors and have supported the important work Maryhaven is doing for years. As we all know, these are challenging times for everyone. Maryhaven is in the trenches, fighting two wars, the COVID-19 pandemic and the opioid epidemic. Our goal today is to raise $15,000. 100% of which will go directly to benefit those in Maryhaven's life-changing programs. And to make your donation go even further, Huntington has provided a match of $15,000. So let's work together and turn all our donations into $30,000 in support of Maryhaven. Just text HOPE, HOPE, to 614-502-4040. Thank you in advance for caring. We're all in this together.
Thank you, Sue and Huntington, for your support for Maryhaven and the community. On behalf of Maryhaven's Board of Directors, staff, and Restoring Lives Committee, thank you again for taking the time to join us for this virtual celebration. Our team, like first responders everywhere, has exemplified courage, tenacity, and compassion in the face of COVID-19. We've worked diligently to follow every health and safety protocol, and I am humbled every day by the extraordinary measures of our staff has implemented to keep patients and our colleagues safe. However, as an anchor of behavioral health and addiction treatment, our doors have remained open because we must be there for those with addictions or severe mental health challenges. And we willingly accept and care for patients who are at the highest risk of contracted COVID-19 because that is our mission. That is why during these challenging times, we continue to explore ways to make it easier for our patients to access treatment. Recently, we opened the Osteopathic Heritage Foundation's Central Intake Department at the Maryhaven Addiction Stabilization Center to allow for a more streamlined approach to providing treatment to community members who need assistance immediately. This strategic initiative allows patients to walk in and receive services right away. No more waiting to receive help, no more waiting for a bed to open, and no more worrying about what the next day may bring. This would not have been possible if not for the generosity of the Osteopathic Heritage Foundations and their commitment to improving health and the quality of life in the community through education, research, and service. We are excited to share this new endeavor. Please enjoy this virtual tour of our new facility.
In collaboration with the Adam H. Board of Franklin County and as part of the Franklin County Opiate Action Plan, Maryhaven opened the Addiction Stabilization Center in January 2018. This center is a 55-bed treatment facility on the south side of Columbus and is devoted to the care of individuals who have recently experienced an opiate overdose or are at high risk to experience an overdose. Since we opened, our expert clinicians and counselors have served over 6,000 patients in the triage unit, with over 90% going on to further treatment. We strive to treat every patient with compassion, patience, and respect. With a triage on the first floor and a 50-bed withdrawal management program on the third floor, this innovative initiative was the first of its kind in the country. What makes this facility so different is that patients come through Maryhaven's triage rather than go through the traditional emergency room admission process. Then, with the help of peer mentors, clients make a decision to move on to withdrawal management. From there, we can link the clients with the best treatment options for long-term recovery. Our withdrawal management program is approximately 3 days and consists of individual and group counseling, art therapy, yoga, and medically assisted treatment. Part of Maryhaven's 2020 initiative has been the opening of the central intake department on the 4th floor of the same building to provide a simplified process for patients to access treatment more efficiently. Thanks to the Osteopathic Heritage Foundations, the lead funder for this project, our vision has become a reality.
We are also grateful to Nationwide, who in partnership with the Ohio Opioid Education Alliance, put together a prevention initiative called Denial Ohio. I'm sure you've seen their commercials.
We love this town. It's nice.
There's like a peace of mind. It's fine.
It just feels safe and secure being in denial.
Living in denial works for me. All the families in denial, they feel the same as we do.
Opioids? Not in denial.
No, it doesn't happen here.
No.
My daughter is good friends.
My boys would tell me anything.
Exactly.
No, our kids are way too busy.
They would never abuse opioids. He gets amazing grades. Welcome to denial.
Don't live in denial, Ohio. Talk to your kids about opioids.
This year, Maryhaven presented Nationwide with the Restoring Lives Award for the important work that they do in our community to raise awareness.
Congratulations, Nationwide. Since 1953, Maryhaven employees have provided a haven where everyone receives hope to heal. The employees have had to adjust to many obstacles during the last 67 years. However, these past few months have introduced challenges that have affected the lives of so many of the staff. And to their credit, they show up each day, committed to making the lives of others better. They have been the real heroes. We have prepared a tribute in their honor.
I want to express my most heartfelt thanks to each and every one of you, the staff of Maryhaven, especially to those who are carrying out critical tasks to manage the COVID-19 and the addiction crisis, including everyone from the medical professionals to those who work every day to keep our facilities and offices operating.
Hello, Maryhaven staff. My name is Tina Ambrosi, and I'm a very proud board member of Maryhaven. I just want to thank you. Thank you for the incredible acts of heroism you're doing every single day to make such an incredible impact in such an unusual time.
Hi, I'm Abby Morrison, Maryhaven team. On behalf of Maryhaven's Board of Directors, and from the bottom of our hearts, thank you. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for your strength. Thank you for all of the hard work you do to serve the individuals that Maryhaven supports throughout the Central Ohio community.
Hello, friends of Maryhaven. I'm Patricia Eschman, a longtime board member of Maryhaven. I'm here to thank the wonderful, hardworking, and dedicated staff at Maryhaven. We couldn't provide the services we do at Maryhaven without each and every one of you.
Hi, my name is Rich Mueller, and I'm a long-term board member here at Maryhaven. I'd like to take the opportunity to express my thanks and gratitude for all the hard work and dedication of those working here at Maryhaven. Your perseverance through these difficult times has been truly amazing and a godsend to those seeking recovery from their addictions. Our clients and our community also want to thank you and express their appreciation for your work in restoring people's lives. I'm honored to be associated with you and to share with others your heroic actions. Thank you and God bless.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kevin Brady, and I am a board member of Maryhaven and currently serving as vice chair. I would like to take a moment to thank each and every one of you for what you're doing each day to help people restore their lives. You are society's heroes, and you are my heroes. Thank you.
Keep up the really terrific work.
Your tremendous efforts have not gone unnoticed. You are truly our heroes, and we are eternally grateful.
I thank you. The community thanks you. We couldn't be what we are and do the important work to serve the population with addiction illnesses without the hard work of the staff at Maryhaven. Thank you so much. You are our heroes.
You are the best guarantee that we will emerge from these crises stronger. Together, we will continue to provide a haven where everyone receives hope to heal. And now, for the reason I get up and come to work every morning, please give your attention to these powerful testimonies.
You know, drugs and alcohol have caused so much chaos in my life.
I started using when I was about 10 years old. I first started smoking weed, and then I would start drinking.
I started injecting cocaine at 16 years old. Then, you know, by the time I was 23, I got hooked to opiates.
I got pregnant when I was 14 with my oldest daughter. I had her when I was 15, and that's when I was introduced to prescription drugs. And I realized when I was taking them for the pain that I liked them. And that turned from the prescription drugs, doing them a lot, to using a needle and shooting heroin. Ultimately resulted in me losing custody of my kids, and that's where my journey of sobriety began.
During my drug and alcohol use, you know, I've caught on 56 misdemeanors, 7 DUIs, 6 felonies, and 16 driver suspensions.
And a Crime Tracker 10 neighborhood alert to share with you tonight. Franklin County deputies are looking for a robber.
I walked in the Speedway gas station. And, you know, the first thing I said is, you know, hang up the phone and give me the money. Speedway ended up handing me $800, and I run out of the gas station that night. The police kick open my door the next day. And, you know, they told all of me to get on the floor, you know, with their guns out. They told all 3 of my babies to get on the floor as well with the guns over their head. And I've always heard about Maryhaven because I've seen a lot of my friends I grew up with. They're sober today and they've changed their lives. And, you know, they went through Maryhaven. So that's where I wanted to go.
Maryhaven helped me gain custody of my kids back. They helped me to know structure. I never knew structure before. Taught me how to have a relationship with women. I didn't know how to do that before. So Maryhaven has been a big part of my life. The first time I met Jeff, I was actually a client in Maryhaven, and when people come in from the outside to speak to you in there, to bring you a meeting, and he was one of those people.
I don't know, like I just laid my eyes on her and I knew she was going to be mine.
And from there, we got married 8 months later.
And, you know, I have so much gratitude for Maryhaven. Maryhaven saved my life.
See the light at the end of the tunnel. You know, there is a light. It's really dark in the beginning and it's really hard, but there is a light.
Don't be ashamed about your story. So, you know, I try to chase my sobriety 24/7, just like I chase my addiction 24/7. I gotta chase this all the time. Today, I have a great relationship with all of my kids. We have a bond like no other. It's getting so much better. You know, my 18-year-old, we text every day. We communicate every single day. And she says, "Daddy, I love you. I'm proud of you."
Because of recovery, I know what to do. Like, I know how to get through things today.
You know, I don't have to wake up every morning feeling dope sick. I don't have to wake up and, you know, the first thing I think about, who am I going to rob today? Who am I going to steal from, you know, for my addiction? And I get to wake up today, you know, put on my work boots, you know, go to work. And it's hot out here. But I just, like I said, it's just part of my sobriety. I love it.
No, I thought that I would die. I definitely thought I'd die. But here I am. If it weren't for Maryhaven, I wouldn't have the life I have today. I wouldn't be able to have my kids back in my life. I wouldn't have met my husband. I wouldn't be a friend today. I just wouldn't. I don't think that I'd be alive today if it wasn't for Maryhaven saving my life.
Without Maryhaven and the people who sponsor Maryhaven, I don't think I would be here today. Maryhaven saved my life, and I owe it to all you guys. Continue to help Maryhaven, please. 5 years ago, I had nothing but a trash bag of clothes. Today I have my family back, running a business. I'm living a life that I've never dreamed of, and it's from you guys. Thanks, Maryhaven.
Wow, that was powerful. And we thank you for sharing your story, Jeff and Bianca. And congratulations on your recovery and your beautiful family. Lives are truly being transformed thanks to the great work of Maryhaven and their staff, and thanks to the financial support of each of you, what you provide. Honestly, stories like this happen because of your generosity. Let's look at our barometer and see how things are going. That's a wonderful start. Thank you. And as Sue said, we are in this together. If you haven't already done so, please text HOPE to 614-502-4040. And now it's my privilege to be able to share the remainder of our time with Sam Quinones. Sam Quinones is a Los Angeles-based freelance journalist, a reporter for more than 30 years, and the author of 3 acclaimed books of narrative nonfiction. Quinones is a veteran reporter on immigration, gangs, drug trafficking, and the border. He speaks today about his 3rd and most recent book, Dreamland: The True Tale of America's Opiate Epidemic. Dreamland chronicles the roots of America's epidemic of opiate addiction, the nation's deadliest drug scourge in history. Quinones is at work on a follow-up to Dreamland about the scourge of fentanyl, methamphetamine, as well as dispatches from grassroots efforts to combat the epidemic. Please welcome Sam Quinones. Sam Quinones, we thank you so much for being with us and sharing your expertise, your knowledge with us. In Dreamland, you paint a pretty stark picture of what we are dealing with in this country. Right now, we have this COVID crisis that seems to be overshadowing everything, but we can't forget that other crisis, can we?
No, and I think it's getting worse because of the COVID issue. We have a lot of folks who are being forced to do what recovering addicts should never do, and that is isolate. And so you have people who are in recovery who are all alone, or they're doing AA meetings over Zoom. And that's not, or you have people who are in addiction still, and they're using drugs without anybody around, and so no one to revive them, that kind of thing. And so all of this, plus we have now, what I think COVID has done, sadly, is almost beginning to recreate the conditions in which the opioid epidemic began, which is isolation, focusing on other things. You're not focusing on this epidemic of drug addiction and so on. And then also enormous job loss, And so all of this seems to me to be kind of recreating what we've got. And I think, I'm afraid to say it, but I'm cringing to see what the numbers of overdose deaths will be for 2020. I think they're going to be much higher than we've ever seen as a country.
Let's take a step back. You did a remarkable amount of research for the book, your most recent book.
Thank you.
An incredible deep dive into what really is a pharmaceutical crisis in this country. Yeah. What made you decide that this is where you wanted to focus your attention? And as you went through this, were there things you discovered that surprised even you?
Oh, yeah. Oh, sure. I mean, I got into this without ever wanting to write a word about healthcare, pain management, addiction. I was very much a crime reporter. I had lived in Mexico for 10 years. I was, I really wanted to write about issues related to Mexico, immigration, drug trafficking, all that kind of stuff. And as I got into it, I was put on a story. I got onto a story about heroin traffickers getting this brand new, huge market in the United States. I couldn't explain this. I didn't know anything about this, how this could possibly be. I thought we'd forgotten, heroin was for the past, and who would ever go back to heroin, for goodness sake. I did not know when I started this book what an OxyContin was or what a Vicodin. I never heard of these drugs, but along the way, I began to focus on how Mexican traffickers of heroin were doing much better business. And then I began to realize that the reason for that had to do with this enormous revolution in pain management in American medicine, which held that we had an epidemic of pain, untreated pain, and that we had the tools to deal with that. And that was those were narcotic painkillers, opioid painkillers, and we should use them more because now science knew that these were virtually non-addictive when used to treat pain. Of course, the science didn't know anything of the kind. But as I got onto it, I worked back. Most people come to this story, I think, in Ohio, certainly, pain pills, then heroin, et cetera, on and on. I kind of backed into it. I was working on a story about heroin, and I began to realize that behind the story was a much, much bigger story than about Mexican traffickers, and that was what had happened in American medicine. I would say what surprised me, certainly initially, most of all, and even today, was the silence that I encountered when I began to dig into this. That's overwhelming to me. I had grown up, I'd become a crime reporter during the crack epidemic, and you couldn't avoid it. Everybody was talking about it. You couldn't avoid talking about crack. There were drive-by shootings, the crime rates went through the roof. Many neighborhoods were just besieged, and you couldn't avoid it. It was really on everywhere around you. But this was quiet epidemic. It was the supply of drugs came from doctors and pharmaceutical companies. And then what's more, I think, key in all this is that families who didn't want to let people know that their loved one had died as a drug addict on a McDonald's bathroom toilet, say, something like that, could easily hide it. So the obituaries were all fabrications, very much like the early days of the AIDS epidemic. And that's what really struck me early on. And actually, I began to feel like when I was writing the book, I told my wife, I think this book is just going to fail. Nobody wants to confront this. Everyone wants to hide it. And that's really, if you ask me, one of the main reasons. That silence was really one of the main reasons why it spread from coast to coast in this country.
Well, certainly here in Ohio, we went through a time that I felt like I was doing stories every other day about pill mills and about, this effort to close down these places where you could go in and easily get a prescription. But these doctors didn't start out like that without having the access to those kinds of pills and without having a market for those kinds of pills. So did you find as you researched this that areas like Ohio were different from, say, where you are in California? Or was this something that pretty much was an American phenomenon?
I would say it became an American phenomenon. It did start in certain areas in Ohio, West Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, Virginia, Maine, New Mexico, places like that where I think it started. But then, of course, it becomes. I don't think there's any place in the country anymore where this has not been an issue over the last 5-10 years, and it just depends on how much areas want to recognize it as such. Or hide their heads. And so to me, it felt very American because here's the thing. No other country in the world has this problem. I mean, drug addiction's all over the planet, but no other country has this problem with enormous quantities of narcotic painkillers and then leading to heroin. That story plays out only right here in the United States. And my next book I'm writing at the moment, trying to finish right now, is going to deal with was going to discuss the idea that all across the world we are seeing pop culture, mass consumerist culture create addiction of legal things like social media, sugar, fast food, video games, gambling, on and on, as well as nicotine and alcohol and so on. And then in the United States, I think in other countries perhaps as well, there's also below this an enormous reservoir of unspoken trauma. And these are common, I think, across the world. I'm not sure that we're a whole lot different necessarily than other countries in Europe or Asia. What is different that over this, we overlaid on all of that, this legal addiction, this trauma, neglect, PTSD, and fighting 2 wars with pretty much the same group of people over the same period of time. We overlaid this massive new supply of opioid painkillers. And that's what makes us different from any other country in the world. And that's why we have the problem that we have. Now, you're seeing it a little bit in Canada, you're seeing a little bit in the UK, but really the story is really right here.
How did we go from having this opiate problem to the Mexican cartels realizing this is a really fertile market for heroin?
Sure.
How did that happen?
These are similar drugs. I mean, heroin and opioids and Vicodin, oxycodone, hydrocodone. These are all drugs that are kind of chemically cousins, very similar and very similar effect on the brain, very similar attachment to the receptors in the brain, withdrawals, euphoria, all these kinds of things when you take them recreationally. And so I would say, as I lived in Mexico for 10 years, I can remember that heroin was nobody wanted to be involved in heroin in Mexico. They had marijuana, which was the staple. Every year in, year out, you're going to sell a amount of marijuana. And then, of course, they had cocaine, which had a far bigger cachet, so to speak. The heroin was viewed, if anything, as almost scuzzier than we view it in the United States. But as the supplies of narcotic painkillers amped up beginning in the mid-1990s, and you just see this, like an airplane taking off from a tarmac just into the sky. That's what our opioid prescribing did. A lot of these people, in fact, did get addicted. Contrary to what the pain specialists and pharmaceutical companies were marketing, a lot of people did get, and they couldn't sustain that. They sometimes their doctors cut them off. They became dependent on OxyContin and Vicodin and all these different pills, and sometimes their doctors cut them off. And then they would go to the black market. But the black market for pills in America usually is about $1 a milligram. If you're doing 200 milligrams a day, that's $200 a day on the street. You can't sustain that. And pretty soon, very soon actually, I would say by the late 90s, people were switching already to heroin. And little by little, the guys I wrote about in Dreamland were the first to figure that out. That's why they're important to this story. They were the first Mexican traffickers to figure out that becoming a new heroin market was on the horizon. But very soon they were overwhelmed by a much larger groups of traffickers and just enormous new entrants. And so people began to figure out that if we just sell heroin into places where the pills are big, we're going to have a huge market because people are going to switch. Our heroin is 1/5 the price and easily as potent as the pills, if not far more so. And then what happens, of course, is that those folks discover fentanyl. And that's what my next book's about, the Mexican discovery of fentanyl. And they begin to realize, wow, why own land? Why grow stuff? Why wait for the seasons? Why care about farming crops? No, we'll make it all in a lab. They'd already done this with methamphetamine, and now you're seeing a huge resurgence in meth as well. But fentanyl was like right in line with that. Gee, we don't have to grow plants. And I think what we're seeing now is that the underworld in general, but certainly the Mexican underworld, is now very, very much involved in synthetic drugs now, because it just makes so much more sense. It's not what the consumer was demanding. It was what the traffickers said, no, makes more sense for us, so we're going to just sell it and they'll buy it because they're strung out now.
We have had warnings here from the coroner's office about batches of fentanyl and how much it's showing up, how it seems to be even more deadly than heroin, how drug users aren't sure what they're getting. And as we talked about earlier, so many drug users right now are isolated because of COVID. it's a shocking incident to be reporting on, that the coroner's office has to give continued warnings about fentanyl. So as you are researching that, are you finding this even more troubling than the research you did on heroin? And the reality is, who's responsible for stopping this?
I'm not sure about that last question. I mean, yes, it's quite a bit more alarming. I think we have entered the era in which the idea of taking recreational drugs is gone. That was an idea that grew up in a time when drugs were far less potent, far more expensive, and far more difficult to find. That none of that is true now. They're extraordinarily cheap, harrowingly potent, and everywhere. And so all of that is very scary. Plus the ability, the ease in which these drugs can be made, and then of course the ease in which certainly fentanyl is very easy to smuggle. It's so little of it gets you a profit that a few ounces is a hugely profitable amount of fentanyl, let alone a kilo or two or what have you. And so this is I've been very, very alarmed. And what it says to me, frankly, is that in an era where we have corporations acting like drug traffickers, essentially, with sugar and social media apps and all the rest, where drug traffickers act like corporations, the only real solution is for us to turn locally, to return and make sure that we have the community bulwarks that can act as defenses from all this. I believe that this is largely, this whole story is very, very much primarily a supply story. We did not have a major demand for heroin until the opioids began being prescribed like crazy. And that then led to fentanyl, which is what the traffickers said you will be using from now on. Not that people were raising their hand, we want fentanyl. Now, of course, it's methamphetamine because Mexican traffickers have found ways to make methamphetamine in quantities that stagger the mind. It's just impossible to imagine how much of this crap they are able to make. And now people are just switching from opioids and fentanyl and heroin and so on to meth. I think we all have to understand that this is the world we live in. This is a synthetic chemical world now. And really, I don't see another solution that does not involve us returning, bolstering our local defenses, bolstering local community, taking care of the vulnerable, making sure we understand that this is what COVID is teaching us. Also, frankly, what BLM is also teaching us is that we are only as strong as the most vulnerable among us. And that is a rule that we probably knew, but maybe had conveniently forgotten, a lot of us, for a long time.
I find it fascinating how you have tied some of this addictive behavior to cultural movements like social media apps, like our consumption of sugar, like fast food. Explain to us a little bit the link you see among all of these things.
I think that one thing that has helped us understand this is that we're now living in the golden age of neuroscience research. The technology we have to understand the brain has allowed us to make huge leaps. There's a lot more to understand. The brain and the universe are probably the two most mystifying entities that we have in our world. But we certainly understand a whole lot more. And we can see now, we can test, we have tested the effect of sugar on the brain, just as an example. Do you know, it's fascinating, do you know that when you give, they've done these tests, that when you give sugar-dependent rats, you give them naloxone, just like you would give a heroin addict who's overdosing. When you give a heroin addict who's overdosing naloxone, that person immediately, comes to life again and goes into withdrawals. That's exactly what happens to rats when they are sugar-dependent rats when they are given naloxone. It means that the sugar is hitting the same receptors in our brain that opiates hit and heroin hits. And they've done these tests on. It's a fascinating thing to understand how much of our addictive tendencies these products hit. Social media, oh my goodness, it's all about that. And gambling, another one, is all about that. And we have huge amount of resources, intellectual resources and money devoted to making products more addictive to us. And sugar is probably one of the biggest ones. But I mean, there are a lot. It's very hard to find a product that modern American corporations know to be somewhat addictive and that they have not attempted to make more so. So this is part of the world where we are living in. As part of reading Dreamland, I began to kind of understand this, and I just stopped drinking sodas. So I don't drink sodas anymore. I just cut out highly processed sugar out of my diet to a great degree. I'd say 90%. And because I began to feel that one of the main lessons that we need to learn from all this is our own consumption matters. What we buy, what we pay attention to, how much exercise we get, all these kinds of things. It's all about our own accountability for our own personal wellness. All of this is so important in what we are in the world we are facing. Because if we leave it up to pharmaceutical corporations or fast food companies, well, they'll tell us, they'll put those things on every interstate off ramp and so on. So really, in my conception, I have to say that the Sinaloa drug cartel, Mexican traffickers take their place alongside software developers for social media apps, chemical lab inventors of new products for sugar and fat combined, gambling casino designers. All of this is part of the same idea that these are folks who are all trying to find ways to activate our brain and make us addicted. And the drug traffickers get the worst rap, of course, but I'm not sure I see a big difference between them and all the other folks.
I imagine along the way, you have made some enemies, and not just big corporations here in this country, but the time that you spent in Mexico, were you were researching people who don't want to have the spotlight focused on them.
Yeah, but I would not go too far down that. Basically, the folks that I was writing about in Dreamland were not the scar faces of the world. They were like farm boys, very similar to kids who would grow up in rural Ohio town somewhere, right? They had jobs that weren't leading them anywhere. They couldn't get married. No girl would marry them. They didn't have any land. And in this one village, this one little town, the folks that I wrote about, they just happened to have a few families develop, and it's then spread a way of selling heroin. I've seen many other immigrant towns, though, where people have one guy gets a job landscaping in Dallas. Pretty soon the whole town's landscaping in Dallas. I'm sure you have stories like this across Ohio. And so the guys that I was really writing about were not the cartel killers. Those came later. Those guys came later. And so when I went down to the areas of Mexico for Dreamland, I did not feel this. I did feel apprehension, I will not lie, but it was not the same kind of thing as you might feel nowadays in other parts of Mexico. That was not the hardest part of the book. The hardest part of the book was to convince families that they should talk to me about their loved one dying. That was more difficult than I had spent 10 years in Mexico. I'd written 2 books about Mexico. I had been all over immigrant Mexico, little villages. I understood that. I'd been part of my life, spoke fluent Spanish, on and on. And so the more difficult task, I have to say, I just wrote to those guys in prison, in federal prison. They were all in federal prison. And I think I interviewed 12 guys, all of whom were in prison when I spoke with them. It was not that hard. It's a gold mine of information, in fact, those guys can be. But the real tough stuff was trying to convince families that it was in their interest and in the interest of their deceased loved ones that they bring this out. And on the entire state, I have to say this, the entire state of Ohio, this was back then. Remember, a lot has changed since Dreamland came out. But back then, 2012, 13, and 14, in the entire state of Ohio, I found 5 families wanted to talk about it. Think of all the thousands of families who were affected. 5 I could actually talk to. end quote.
Before I let you go, I know Dreamland was a game changer for a lot of people. So tell us a little bit about the book you're working on now, because I know it involves fentanyl, and
Yes.
here in Central Ohio, we need to hear this.
Yeah, my publisher wanted me to write this follow-up, what's happened next, what's happened since. And so it's about fentanyl, and it's about methamphetamine. Methamphetamine is what clues the traffickers in Mexico in the 1990s into the idea that they don't need to grow plants, grow drugs anymore. They can make them in a chemical lab. And then along comes our opioid epidemic. A few years pass, a lot of people get addicted, and they realize, oh, there's this thing called fentanyl no one's ever heard of. And part of the story is how they figured that out. Very interesting story. So you have methamphetamine and fentanyl showing traffickers the way forward is through synthetics, not through growing plants in the ground and owning land. And it's a very new world for a lot of folks, because the typical Mexican trafficker is a ranchero, a guy who grew up on the ground, a rancher, kind of a guy who's used to the earth. But those days are over. There's also a series of chapters about the neuroscience, which I found very interesting, found some very wonderful neuroscientists to help educate me on how this all works. And again, the exercise or the tests that they've done, experiments they've done on this. There's another 5 chapters on the Sackler family. I didn't have room for every drug company and all the lawsuits. That's one of the big differences, by the way. When I was writing Dreamland, I remember this very well. It was like there were 3 lawsuits against drug companies, and I thought they're all going to fail. All the lawsuits had not done well up to that point. And now I believe there's more than 2,600. I have lost count how many plaintiffs there are. County is all over the place. AG, attorney generals, all these folks, And so there's one, but what a lot of that has done is dislodge all this information from the inner, vaults of these companies, primarily Purdue, and how the companies were behaving during all these years. And to me, that was like gold. I was like, oh my God, I would have loved to have had that during Dreamland. It was all tucked away, hidden, and now it's public record, and thank goodness for that. And then, but finally, probably most important, there's stories from communities in a couple places in Ohio, Hardin County being one, and it just the focus of these stories is not on this is how we find our way out of this. It's not like prescriptive. It's not saying this is how. No, it's a way of saying that what we need to do is behave as if every small, vulnerable person matters. And here's a few stories of people doing that. Because I think that is really what we need to learn out of the COVID problem. I think BLM as well, but also the epidemic is showing us various things. But one of them is we are only as strong as the most vulnerable among us, and I think that that we need to take tiny steps. There is no miracle cure for any of this stuff. It's tiny steps toward a larger goal of a stronger, healthier, defensible communities, which we have sadly denuded of things like Dreamland Pool in Portsmouth, Ohio, and left them very defenseless. So that's what the next book's going to be about, and I'm hoping to have it done within like 6 weeks or something like that, and then maybe it'll be out by May or something like that.
All right. Well, we will look forward to it. And Sam, we can't thank you enough, not only for being with us for this interview, but for dedicating so much of your life to this important research. It's remarkable what you've learned and how you've presented it. Thank you so much for taking time to be with us here in Ohio.
It's great of you to take the time as well, Colleen. Thanks very much. And thanks, say hello to all the folks at Maryhaven, a very essential component of Central Ohio life there.
Thanks.
Talk to you later.
We hope you enjoyed hearing from Sam Quinones. He has an incredible body of work. And if you learned nothing else, I hope that you learned how important it is to support the work of organizations like Maryhaven, who are fighting this scourge on the ground and making a difference in lives every day. And they can only do that because of people like you and your support. So let's take one last look at our barometer. And that is wonderful. We thank you so much. Remember, you can still text your donations to Maryhaven throughout the end of the day. And on behalf of Maryhaven's Board of Directors, thanks to all of you for joining us today. Special thanks to Nationwide, Huntington, Honda, and all of our other sponsors. And again, we cannot thank you enough for your generosity. You are helping to restore lives. Have a wonderful day. Be safe and be well.